My name is not important. What matters is that my friend, who I will call Ray here, is just as obsessed with fishing as I am. Maybe more. If I said we were going out at 5 in the morning on a weekday, he would already be sitting in the car before I finished the sentence. 2 months ago, early spring, we decided to head out to marsh for speckled trout. Not our first time. We had run this route dozens of times, enough to know which spots were worth stopping at and what time was best to leave. We took my 2-person kayak. The marshes around here are shallow in most places, so the kayak has always been the first choice. The weather was still cold for early spring, and the water was even colder, but that was never a reason not to go. We started paddling around 6 in the morning. 30 minutes later, we found a spot that felt promising. The surface was calm. No other fishermen, as far as we could see. We cracked open a couple of beers earlier than we probably should have and got to fishing. Same as hundreds of mornings before. There was no sign that day would be any different. We had been fishing for about an hour when Ray hooked something decent from the field of the pool. I watched from my side of the kayak as he started reeling in. Ray is expressive when he fishes. He leaned over the edge to get a better look at the water, tilting forward with his eyes locked on the surface. I knew what was going to happen 1 second before it did, but not fast enough to say anything. His phone slid out of his jacket pocket and dropped into the water with a short, final sound. No big splash. Just gone, like the water swallowed it. Ray was silent for 3 full seconds. Then he started talking in a way I will not write out here. He said his phone had insurance, but the insurance did not cover loss, only damage. The replacement would cost several $100s he did not have at the time. I could not blame him. I did not have a spare few hundred to pull out of nowhere either. We spent the next 20 minutes using our paddles to feel around the marsh bottom in that area. The water was murky brown-black, visibility maybe a few inches down at best. The bottom was all mud and aquatic vegetation. We even started second-guessing where we should be searching, even though we had both watched the phone go in. Finally, I told Ray we were not going to find it this way. We might as well keep fishing and try to salvage something out of the day. Ray shook his head. He said he was not leaving without that phone. Before I could say anything, Ray had already started taking off his shoes, then his pants. The idea was not bad in principle. Feeling along the bottom with your feet is a lot more sensitive than poking around with a paddle. The marsh floor was soft mud. He might actually feel something hard under all of it. The moment his feet hit the water, he let out a string of curses about how cold it was. That section of the marsh turned out to be deeper than either of us had expected. The water came up to his waist, about 4.5 feet. Ray stood there with his face tight against the cold and started moving slowly, his feet sweeping across the mud below. I sat in the kayak and waited. The first minute passed. Then the second. The water was too cold to stay in for long, and I was starting to hope he would just give up and climb back in. Then Ray screamed. Not a startled shout. Something different. The kind that dropped my stomach before my brain had finished processing the sound. Before I could react, his body pitched forward and disappeared below the surface. 1 second he was standing upright. The next he was gone. I froze for maybe 2 full seconds. Then I started pulling off my jacket and shoes, getting ready to go in after him. Before my feet touched the water, Ray exploded back up through the surface. Mud and marsh vegetation covered his face and hair completely. He was coughing and gasping, and his eyes were wild, moving in every direction before finally locking onto mine. He yelled one word, "Go." I grabbed his hand, and he hauled himself back into the kayak in a way that was not controlled or graceful. The way a person moves when they have stopped caring about anything except getting out of the water. We started paddling. Ray did not look back, but his eyes kept cutting to the water alongside the kayak. like he was waiting for something to come up through the surface. We did not stop paddling until that spot was well behind us. Once we were far enough away, I asked him what had happened. Ray took a few seconds before answering, not because he did not want to, more because it seemed like he was still trying to put what he had felt into words. He said something grabbed his ankle, not a slip on the mud, not marsh vegetation tangling around his leg. Something active, something that wrapped around his ankle with intention, and then yanked him down hard. I asked what it felt like. Claws? Tentacle? Teeth? He was quiet for a moment. Then he said it felt like a hand. A human hand. I did not know what to say to that, so I said nothing. He said after he was pulled under, whatever had grabbed him started dragging him. Not down, sideways, away from the kayak. He kicked and fought until the grip finally broke. He did not know how long it lasted. The ride back to the boat launch was almost completely silent. I tried to convince Ray that it was probably a big catfish, maybe an alligator gar. The Louisiana marshes have plenty of things living on the bottom that we never see. Ray listened and did not argue with any of it. I also tried to convince myself that the hand thing had a reasonable explanation. A person panicking underwater, in total darkness, in water cold enough to shut your body down. Their brain is not working the way it normally does. Something that wraps around you, something that presses hard, can feel like anything. It can feel like fingers. It can feel like a palm closing. Panic fills in the blanks with whatever is most familiar and most terrifying at the same time. That is a reasonable explanation. I believe that, or at least I am trying to believe that. But he was the one in the water, not me. Ray never found his phone. He never brought up going back to that spot. Neither did I. Every time I have been marsh fishing since that day, my eyes go down to the surface of the water, not because I expect to see something, just the opposite. There is one thing I still cannot set aside. The day after I saw Ray's ankle, the bruising was not the kind you get from slipping on mud, or from marsh grass tangling around your leg, or from thrashing in a panic underwater. The pattern was too deliberate, too uniform, too close to what you would expect from something that had wrapped around him on purpose. I don't know why I'm writing this now. It happened a long time ago, more than 10 years. But last night was bad. I woke up at 2 a.m. with my heart hammering, and I couldn't go back to sleep because I suddenly remembered the lake again. Maybe writing this will help. Maybe it won't. But I need to tell someone, and I can't tell anyone who knows me. My brother and I, who I'll call JJ here, grew up in a small town surrounded by woods. Not the kind of town known for anything in particular. Just a small town with one convenience store, one soccer field where the grass always grew uneven, and a lot of trees. We fished from a young age. Our dad taught us. But there was one lake we found on our own. Not because he took us there. We found it in 6th or 7th grade, when we decided to follow a trail we'd never tried before. The lake was hidden behind a fairly long stretch of woods. No signs, no parking. You had to know how to get in. And even then, you had to be willing to walk about 20 minutes through brush and tree roots that pushed up through the ground. That was exactly why we loved it. It was almost always empty. The water was dark with a deep greenish tint, like tea that had been steeped too long. From the bank, you couldn't see the bottom even in the shallower parts. We never swam there. It never even crossed our minds. That was a fishing lake, not a swimming lake. We usually fished from late afternoon into the night, not morning. While most fishermen preferred dawn, we chose the sky as it darkened. There was something different about the atmosphere. The woods around that lake felt different at night. Quieter, more like it belonged to us. That was our routine for years. We'd done it hundreds of times. That night was a Friday. We had just settled onto the flat rocks that formed our favorite spot at the edge of the lake, a little natural ledge that jutted out over the water. The sun had just gone down. The sky still held a thin strip of orange at the horizon, but the surface of the lake had already started to go dark. We just finished baiting up crickets that night. I don't remember who saw it first, but suddenly we were both looking in the same direction, toward the far side of the lake, the side opposite from where we were sitting. There were ripples over there, not small ripples like a fish surfacing, larger ripples, wider, like something moving just beneath the surface. On the far side of the lake, where the light barely reached anymore. "Big fish," JJ said. I nodded, but I kept watching. The ripples weren't moving like a fish. Fish move fast and unpredictably. This was moving slowly, like something rotating, or swimming straight up toward the surface. Then something started to rise out of the water, dark and large and upright. I couldn't see clearly because of the distance and the fading light, but the shape was wrong for a fish. Too tall, too vertical, rising from the water like a post being slowly set upright. JJ said something I won't repeat here. I said the exact same thing half a second later. A person. There was a person in that lake, on the far side, in the dark water, after sunset, and not someone who had just waded in, not someone standing at the edge. This was someone who had just risen from below the surface, which meant they had been underwater, and we hadn't noticed them for however long since we'd arrived. My first thought was, how long have they been down there? My second thought was, we need to leave. JJ, I see it. We're leaving. Wait. I didn't want to wait, but JJ was already on his feet, with one arm out to stop me, his eyes locked on the far side of the lake. And I, for some reason, didn't leave either. I just stood there and kept watching. The figure was standing in the water. Waist deep, I thought. They weren't moving quickly or frantically, not like someone who had nearly drowned. They were just standing, and then they started swaying, slowly, rhythmically, like they were following something we couldn't hear from our side. Not the sway of someone who was cold, not the sway of someone exhausted. This was deliberate, like someone praying or counting something in their head, or performing something that had its own meaning we didn't understand. JJ nudged my arm. What are they doing? I don't know. Fishing? In the water? We were both quiet. I reached down and grazed the surface of the lake with the side of my hand. Pulled it back immediately. Freezing cold. Not the refreshing kind. The kind that bites. The kind that makes your fingers feel like they'll stop working within minutes. Whoever was in that water, they were not a normal person. We tried to fish again, or pretended to. Our hands held the rods, but our eyes weren't on the water in front of us. They were on the far side of the lake. The figure was still there, still swaying. A few minutes passed. Maybe 5, maybe 10. Time felt strange that night. Then JJ nudged my arm again. Hard this time. Look. I looked. The figure was gone, sinking back below the surface, slowly, the same way they had risen. No splash, no panic, just down, calmly, until the surface of the lake went dark and flat again like there was nothing there at all. We waited and waited. JJ pulled up the stopwatch on his phone. I watched the numbers turn. 1 minute, 2 minutes. At 2 minutes and 40-something seconds, I started packing up our gear. JJ, we're leaving. Just a little longer. Not a little longer. Now. But JJ didn't move. His eyes were on the stopwatch. And I didn't move either, because something was keeping my feet in place. 3 minutes. Just before the 3-minute mark, ripples appeared on the surface of the lake again, but not on the far side. They appeared in the middle, closer than before. Much closer, a third of the way across from where we were standing, which meant that for nearly 3 minutes, They hadn't just been holding their breath underwater. They had been swimming beneath the surface, in the dark, in water cold enough to numb my fingers in seconds, toward us. I don't remember deciding to stand up, but I was standing, and our bags were in our hands, and our feet were already moving toward the trail before my mind had finished forming a single complete thought. JJ didn't argue this time. We didn't run. Or maybe we did. I don't remember clearly. What I remember is trees passing on either side of us, roots that almost tripped me twice, and the sound of our own breathing too loud in our ears. I didn't look back. JJ didn't either. We didn't talk about it on the way out of the woods. Not in the car. Not that night. In the car, neither of us spoke for the first few minutes. JJ was the one who finally said something. He asked if I wanted to call the police. I told him it was up to him. He went quiet again, then started the engine, and we drove home. I didn't know what we would have reported anyway, that there was something in the lake, that it had been underwater for nearly 3 minutes and surfaced much closer than before, that we hadn't waited to see what would happen next. That wasn't a report. It was just an admission that we were scared and we left. We didn't go back to that lake for almost a year. When we finally did, we brought our dad. We told him what happened, and he listened seriously, more seriously than I expected. But the lake was calm. Our flat rocks were still there. The water was still dark with that same greenish tint. Nothing. We fished until dark and drove home without incident. Slowly, the lake became ours again. JJ started making it into a light joke. Every now and then he'd stare across to the far side and say, "All clear, looks safe tonight." We laughed. After a while it felt normal. But there was one thing we never did again after that night. We never dipped our hands into the water at that lake. Not because we decided to. Not because we talked about it. It just never happened again, naturally, without words. As if our hands remembered something our minds didn't want to. This happened 2 months ago, and I still think about it. Not every day, but often enough that I finally decided to write it down here, in a place where no one knows me, at an hour when I should already be asleep. There's a small reservoir about 10 minutes from my friend's house. We have been going there on and off for the past year or so. Technically, it is county property. There are no trespassing signs posted every few feet along the chain link fence surrounding it. But my friend had cut a hole in the fence a long time ago, and we always laugh about it every time we squeeze through. The reservoir itself is small. Dense woods on 3 sides and a narrow access road on the 4th. The water is clear, and there is a small sandy area at one end with flat rocks that are good for sitting. A nice spot. Secluded and quiet. Nobody else knew about it, or so we thought. That Saturday we headed out in the late afternoon, the sun already starting to drop by the time we made it through the fence. My friend set up his fishing gear immediately. Same as always. He cannot sit still near water without a line in it. I settled onto our usual flat rock with a can of beer and let the evening come in slowly. There was nothing to suggest the night would be any different from before. My friend saw it first. He stood up, pointed along the bank, and asked what that was. I squinted in the direction he was pointing, a ways down the shoreline. Caught in the reeds at the water's edge was a canoe. The way it was sitting looked wrong. Not tied off, not pulled up deliberately. More like something that had drifted there on its own and stopped, waiting for a current that did not exist. We both stared at it for a few seconds. Then he said, "Let's go look." The walk along the bank took about 3 minutes. The closer we got, the clearer it became that something was off. The canoe was not just empty in the way an abandoned thing is empty. It looked more like it had been left in the middle of something. A fishing rod lying across the bow with its line still hanging down into the water. A tackle box sitting open with the contents shuffled around like someone had been digging through it in a hurry. Half a sandwich wrapped in plastic on the seat. And on the main seat, a phone. Screen locked but the flashlight on, pointing at nothing. My friend picked it up, turned it over, and set it back down in the same spot. His expression was something I could not quite name. Not scared. More like someone who had just noticed that the numbers do not add up. I said, "Who leave their phone behind?" He did not answer. He just looked around the area, at the tree line behind the canoe, at the surface of the water in front of it. Nobody there. We walked back to our spot, and I started going through the contents of the canoe out loud, the way you do when you need to hear something repeated before it fully lands. Everything in there could be explained. I said, maybe the owner heard us coming, knew they were trespassing, and bolted before they got caught. But the phone. Nobody runs and leaves their phone. Nobody. No matter how panicked you are, your hand finds that phone before your feet start moving. It is just how it works. My friend nodded slowly. I knew he agreed. I knew because he had stopped fishing and was just sitting there looking at the canoe from a distance. The way someone looks at a thing they are trying to solve. I started feeling something I did not want to acknowledge. The need to leave. Then my friend touched my arm. I followed his eyes across the reservoir. On the far side, standing in the water up to their knees, was a person. Still, facing us. The sun had just gone down, but there was still enough light to see them clearly. They were holding something long, maybe a stick, maybe a rod, but that was not what dropped my stomach. They were not moving. Not at all. Not the small shift of someone standing in cold water. Not the normal redistribution of weight that a body does without thinking. They were standing the way something stands when it does not need to move. Upright and perfectly still in a way that felt wrong for a human body that should be feeling the water and the cold and the discomfort. And they were looking at us. I had no idea how long they had been there. My friend said we're leaving. Quiet, but not a suggestion. We started packing up faster than we needed to, hands moving before decisions were made. We were already walking quickly toward the fence when I looked back one last time. The figure moved. Still no sound. No shout. No warning. They just dropped whatever they were holding and started swimming toward us. That is what made me run. If they had shouted, if they had been angry, I think I could have kept my head. Angry people shout. Threatened people shout. But this figure did not make a single sound. They just moved toward us with the same calm they had been standing with a moment before. Like this was not a surprise to them. Like they had already known we were going to leave and had already decided what they were going to do when we did. I yelled at my friend and we ran. The chain link fence. The hole my friend had cut years ago. I went through first, my friend right behind me, and as I got to the other side, I could hear the sound of water from the direction of the reservoir getting louder. We did not stop until we were inside the car. 20 minutes later, we were sitting in the parking lot of a convenience store 2 blocks away because neither of us wanted to go straight home. My friend was the one who finally said it out loud. He said, "Think about it. If that figure was the owner of the canoe, they came in by canoe, but the canoe was on our side. They were standing on the opposite side. That means they crossed the entire reservoir before we even got there. And if they already crossed, why was the canoe not with them on their side? I had nothing." He kept going. "But say that figure was not the owner of the canoe. Then someone else came in by canoe first, left everything behind, including a phone that was still on, and is now nowhere. Which means the question is not Who was that figure? The question is, where did the actual owner of the canoe go? We sat with that for a while. We talked about calling the police. But what would we say? That we broke into county property, found a canoe that was not ours, and then someone silently swam toward us without making a sound. The police would not do anything with that, and we would probably be the ones in trouble. We drove home that night without any conclusions. A week later, my friend went back in the daytime. Alone, just a look. He said the canoe was gone, but the fishing rod was still there. Same position, line still hanging in the water. The tackle box still open. The sandwich was gone, probably taken by an animal. The phone was gone too, but not because someone picked it up. My friend said there was a mark on the seat where it had been. A rectangular scorch mark, exactly the shape of the phone, right where it had been sitting that night. Like something left on too long in one place, burning its outline into the surface before it disappeared. What made me write, this is not how fast it swam. What made me write, this is the way it was standing before we even knew it was there. I keep coming back to that image. Something standing perfectly still in knee-deep water, at a reservoir that is not supposed to have anyone in it, after dark, holding something long, facing in our direction, not swaying, not shifting, not doing anything to show it was alive, just waiting. And the one thing I cannot set aside, no matter how many times I go over it, the canoe was on our side. The figure was on the opposite side. If it came in by canoe, it had to cross the reservoir to get to where it was standing. And if it already crossed, the canoe should have been there with it. But the canoe was on our side, and the phone was still on. I do not know who owned that canoe. I do not want to know.